The night air over Lagos shimmered with heat and ambition. From the rooftop of a luxury high-rise overlooking Victoria Island, the city stretched like a sea of gold, headlights weaving through traffic, distant music floating from rooftop lounges, and the faint scent of salt drifting in from the Atlantic. Lagos never truly slept. It only paused to count its money. Inside the marble lobby, the floor gleamed beneath crystal chandeliers imported from Europe. Security guards lowered their eyes as he walked in. He did not rush. The African crime lord moved with the slow confidence of a man who owned more than buildings. He owned loyalties. Fear. Silence. His tailored black suit fit like armor. A gold ring flashed under the lights as he pressed the private elevator button, access restricted to penthouse levels only. The guards did not ask questions. No one ever did. Behind him, heels clicked against polished stone. The mistress approached like a storm wrapped in silk. Her red dress clung effortlessly, bold against her deep skin tone. Expensive perfume trailed behind her, sweet, dangerous, unforgettable. "You shouldn't be seen like this," she teased softly, stepping closer. "What if someone talks?" He smirked without looking at her. "In this city, people don't talk about me. They pray I don't talk about them." The elevator doors slid open with a quiet hum. They stepped inside. The doors closed. For a moment, it was just the two of them in a mirrored box rising above Lagos. The reflection of power and temptation stared back from every angle. She leaned against the polished steel wall, studying him. "Your wife still thinks you're at that meeting?" He adjusted his cufflinks calmly. "My wife thinks what I allow her to think." The elevator began its smooth ascent. Floor numbers blinked upward. High voltage. Before we continue, if you love intense, shocking stories like this, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and share this video, because the night is about to get even darker. High voltage. The air between them grew heavier, charged, intimate, but edged with something darker. This wasn't love. It was possession. Ego. Control. Outside, the city lights flickered like distant stars. Inside, silence stretched thick. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "In this world, loyalty is bought. Respect is taken." She smiled, believing she was chosen. What neither of them noticed was the small red light blinking in the corner of the elevator ceiling. And somewhere above them, someone was already waiting. The numbers continued to rise. Before the tailored suits, before the penthouse views and imported champagne, he was just a barefoot boy running through the dusty streets of Ajagunal. Back then, Lagos did not shimmer. It burned. The sun baked the tin roofs until they glowed. The gutters overflowed during rainy season. Generators coughed through the night because electricity was a privilege, not a promise. He grew up in a single-room shack where the walls sweated and the heat and hunger sat at the table like an extra family member. His mother used to say, "In this country, my son, you either wait for opportunity, or you take it." He chose to take it. As a teenager, he started at the ports, Apapa docks, carrying cargo for men who wore gold chains and never smiled. He watched. He listened. He learned who paid customs officers to look away. Who controlled the shipping manifests? Who moved goods that were never officially recorded? One night, when a rival gang tried to hijack a container shipment, he didn't run. He stood his ground. A gunshot echoed across the water. Chaos erupted. But when the dust settled, it was his name whispered among the dockworkers. "Who is that boy?" one of the older smugglers asked. "That's not a boy," another muttered. "That one, he's dangerous." From that night on, doors opened. Years passed. Rivals disappeared. Some left Lagos. Some were buried in silence. Politicians began inviting him to private meetings in Ikoyi mansions. Envelopes exchanged hands. Contracts were signed without signatures. He didn't just control shipments anymore. He controlled favors. Police commissioners answered his calls before they answered their own wives. Street gangs wore his symbol, a subtle mark stitched inside their jackets. Markets paid protection. Nightclubs paid respect. And when people spoke of him, they lowered their voices. The king of the underworld, they called him. He sat at the top floor of his empire now, looking down at the city that once ignored him. The boy from the slums had become a man who could make Lagos tremble. Untouchable. Unstoppable. At least, that's what he believed. But power built on fear has cracks no one sees, until someone brave enough dares to press on them. And somewhere in the city, someone already knew exactly where those cracks were. The elevator hummed softly as it rose, its mirrored walls reflecting their tense silhouettes. Outside, Lagos stretched like a living organism, neon signs flickering, car horns wailing, music from distant street corners spilling into the night. But inside the private cage, the city was irrelevant. Here, it was only the two of them, and a power neither truly controlled, or so she thought. The mistress leaned casually against the polished steel wall, one hand tracing the engraved panel of buttons as if it were a map of possibilities. Her eyes glimmered with ambition. "You know," she began, her voice low and teasing, "I've been thinking, maybe your wife doesn't appreciate you the way I do." He smirked, adjusting the cuff of his suit with the precision of a man who always measured his presence. "Your loyalty is refreshing," he murmured. His eyes, dark and calculating, studied her as though he were reading a novel he already knew the ending to. "It's not just charm that will get you far in my world. Influence, control, that's the real currency." She smiled, letting the words sink in. Influence. Control. Luxury. Everything she had dreamed of when she first noticed the subtle power he wielded, the way shopkeepers bowed just a little lower when he walked past, the way whispers followed him down every street, was suddenly within reach. Being chosen by him felt like a coronation. The elevator lights flickered for a second, casting their shadows in jagged patterns on the walls. She stepped closer, emboldened. "And you'll make sure I get it, won't you?" she asked, letting the question hang in the tense air. He leaned in slightly, so close that the warmth of his presence brushed her skin. "If you play your part wisely," he said, voice a low rumble, "I can promise you a place beside me. Not as a trophy, not as a whisper in the shadows, but as someone who matters." Her chest tightened with excitement, the illusion of power filling her like a tangible perfume. She had never felt so significant, so elevated, so dangerous. For the first time, she believed she could step into his world and change it, maybe even replace the wife he barely acknowledged. The mirrored walls reflected not just their faces but their ambitions, his, steeped in arrogance and control, hers, a shimmering, intoxicating mixture of desire and calculation. As the elevator approached the higher floors, the quiet hum of its mechanisms became almost a heartbeat, a prelude to the moment when the fragile balance of their little universe would be tested. Outside, the city pulsed with life, but inside, only one truth mattered: power is intoxicating, and illusions of control are the most dangerous of all. The doors were about to open. And waiting beyond them was someone neither of them had fully accounted for. The city lights of Lagos glimmered far below the high-rise, but inside her apartment, everything was still. The air was scented faintly with sandalwood and jasmine, drifting from an incense burner she had lit hours ago. Soft classical music played in the background, barely audible, a deliberate choice, not for entertainment, but to keep her mind sharp, focused, deliberate. She sat in the high-backed chair by the window, her posture perfect, her expression unreadable. The glow from the city outlined her silhouette, elegant, composed, a queen in a kingdom few truly understood. Her hands rested calmly on the armrests, but her mind moved faster than anyone could follow, reviewing every detail, every whisper, every unusual glance her husband had offered lately. For months, she had suspected. The late nights, the unexplained meetings, the new perfume that didn't belong to her. But she never overreacted. She never showed fear, anger, or panic. Emotions were liabilities. Strategy was her weapon. And she had mastered it. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Ma'am," said her discreet assistant, a young man with sharp eyes who had been with her for years. "Dinner is ready," and your driver is outside." "Thank you," she replied calmly, her voice smooth, almost melodic, yet carrying an invisible weight. She did not rise. She did not smile. Every movement was deliberate. "Leave the door unlocked. I may be expecting someone, or perhaps, they will come to me uninvited." Her assistant hesitated, sensing the unspoken meaning in her words. He nodded silently and retreated, closing the door without a sound. She rose slowly, walking to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the streets below. The city thrummed with life, full of chaos and noise, but she felt detached, above it all. In the reflection, her own eyes stared back at her, calm and calculating. She was not a woman to be rushed, caught off guard, or underestimated. A faint smile touched her lips, almost imperceptible. If her husband believed he could hide his betrayal, he had underestimated her patience, her intelligence, and her reach. Every plan, every alliance, every quiet move she had made over the years now positioned her perfectly. She would not react with anger. She would act with precision. From the streets below, the distant hum of cars and music continued, oblivious to the storm about to unfold above them. She turned away from the window and moved toward her bedroom, her steps silent but purposeful. Tonight, she would remind him that power was never just about fear or control. Sometimes, it was quiet. Sometimes, it was unseen. And sometimes, it was waiting in the shadows, perfectly prepared. The elevator doors on another floor were about to open. She was ready. The elevator glided upward, smooth and unassuming, like a predator stalking through the night. The crime lord stood close to the mistress, his hand brushing hers as if by accident, his lips curved in that self-assured smirk that had silenced rivals and charmed allies. The mirrored walls reflected their proximity, their power, their arrogance. Outside, Lagos hummed with life, car horns blaring, music spilling from street corners, and the distant roar of the Atlantic reminding the city it never slept. But inside the elevator, the world had narrowed to them, and their secrets. The numbers ticked upward, 26, 27, 28, until, abruptly, the elevator shuddered and stopped. A mechanical groan echoed through the cabin. The lights flickered for a heartbeat, and then the soft hum returned. The mistress glanced at him, confusion flashing in her eyes. "What's happening?" she asked, her voice a fragile attempt at composure. "Probably a glitch," he said, adjusting his cufflinks, his tone casual but eyes sharp, scanning the control panel. "Nothing to worry about." But then the doors began to slide open, slowly, deliberately, on a floor neither of them had expected. And there she was. The wife stepped into the elevator. Her presence was magnetic, effortless, and utterly commanding. She was dressed in a sleek, understated outfit, no embellishments, no color that screamed attention, but her confidence made every reflective surface in the cabin bend toward her. There was no yelling. No dramatic entrance. Just a calm authority that made the air itself still. The mistress froze, the red dress suddenly feeling gaudy, powerless. Her smile faltered. Her eyes darted between the husband she had believed untouchable and the woman who had just undone every assumption she had made. The crime lord's smirk vanished. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty passed over his face. He opened his mouth but could not find words that would matter in this moment. "Good evening," the wife said softly, her voice smooth, measured, carrying a weight that neither threat nor anger could match. "I didn't realize I was interrupting. Or perhaps I was meant to see this for myself." Silence. The mirrored walls reflected three people, each processing the situation in different ways, one with arrogance, one with shock, one with quiet dominance. The elevator, once a space of seduction and secrets, had transformed into a chamber of judgment. Outside, the city pulsed as if nothing had changed. Inside, time seemed suspended. Every heartbeat, every inhale, was magnified. The mistress realized she had miscalculated. The crime lord realized he had been blind. And the wife, she smiled ever so slightly, knowing the balance of power had just shifted. The doors would close again. But when they did, nothing would ever be the same. The elevator air had grown heavy, almost electric, as the wife stood poised between them. Her eyes, steady and unyielding, met his first. The crime lord, who had never known hesitation, now fumbled for dominance, feeling a strange weight pressing down on him, one he had not anticipated. She spoke, her voice calm but deliberate, slicing through the tension like a razor. "Do you really think all of Lagos bends to your will?" she asked, stepping closer, letting the mirrored walls reflect her quiet authority. "Or do you only believe it does because you've never faced someone patient enough to watch?" The mistress stiffened, caught between curiosity and fear, the sheen of confidence she wore moments ago beginning to crumble. "My name is on the accounts," the wife continued, voice like silk over steel. "Every property in Victoria Island, Ikoyi, even Lekki. Everything you think you own, is under my name. And the alliances you brag about in hushed corridors? Secured long before you made the calls. Politicians, business leaders, even some of your so-called loyal allies, they answer to me now." The crime lord's eyes widened. For years, he had moved like a king, untouchable, feared, admired. And yet, here he was, suddenly unsure where the real power lay. "You've, what?" he muttered, disbelief coloring his tone. The wife tilted her head slightly, a faint, unamused smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "I've been patient. Quiet. Watching the cracks form while you pretended you controlled everything. You see, my dear, the world doesn't respond to bluster and threats. It responds to planning, influence, and foresight. Something you've never truly mastered." The mistress gasped softly, her grip on her own confidence slipping. Her carefully crafted illusion of being chosen, being powerful, began to dissolve. The red of her dress now felt like a warning sign, a marker of someone used and misled. She had thought she could step into his world, but she had underestimated the one woman who truly held the strings. I didn't realize," the mistress whispered, her voice small, edged with shame. "Now you do," the wife said, her tone even, almost gentle. "And I suggest you remember it." The crime lord's jaw tightened. Pride, the force that had propelled him to dominance, now felt brittle. His empire of fear was vast, but fragile when faced with someone who wielded intelligence over intimidation. The mirrors reflected three figures, each measuring the shifting hierarchy. One was shocked, one was humbled, and one had claimed control without raising her voice, without a single shout. Outside, the city continued to pulse with life, unaware of the quiet coup unfolding above it. Inside, a new ruler had silently emerged. The elevator would not remain still forever. But when the doors opened next, the world outside and inside would recognize a change that no one could ignore. The crime lord's mask of control shattered in slow, uneven cracks. For years, he had walked through Lagos like a storm incarnate, feared and untouchable, his footsteps echoing power across streets and boardrooms alike. But now, trapped in the confined space of the elevator with the wife who had always moved in silence, he felt the first real tremor of vulnerability. His breathing grew shallow. Eyes darting, searching the mirrored walls as if an ally might appear to save him, he realized no one could. Not tonight. Not here. You can't do this," he spat, his voice sharp, edged with panic. "I built everything. Everything belongs to me." The wife's calm gaze never wavered. She leaned slightly against the polished wall, her hands folded, as if she were observing a child throwing a tantrum. "I don't take what isn't mine," she said, her voice low, deliberate. "I've simply protected what should have been protected all along." He clenched his fists, knuckles whitening. The mirrors reflected a man unraveling, the smirk replaced by terror and disbelief. I control the streets," he stammered, desperation creeping into his tone. "The gangs, the politicians, they all answer to me." "And yet," she said, stepping closer, her presence heavy with quiet authority, "the foundation, the structure, the real empire, is already under my control. Accounts frozen. Rivals informed. Alliances secured. If I choose to walk away, the streets can rage as much as they want, you won't touch a thing." He staggered back, heart pounding. Anger boiled, but it was impotent, misplaced. His ego, forged in fear and intimidation, had never known challenge like this. Panic replaced confidence. He had always believed fear was enough to bend people, to maintain loyalty. But fear alone could not counter intelligence, foresight, and patience. "You're bluffing," he growled, his voice cracking. She smiled faintly, the hint of triumph clear only to him. "Check your accounts. Call your contacts. Or don't. The truth doesn't need your acknowledgement to exist." The elevator hummed, almost mocking in its monotony, while the city outside pulsed with lights and distant sounds, oblivious to the collapse unfolding above it. He had ruled with intimidation for years, but the foundation of his empire, the very structure that allowed him to dominate, was no longer his. And the woman who had quietly planned every step had revealed it in a single, unassuming confrontation. The crime lord's breathing slowed, though fear lingered beneath the surface. He had built kingdoms in Lagos, but power without foresight was brittle. He may have ruled the streets, but she now owned the bones of his empire. The elevator lights flickered, signaling their imminent arrival at the next floor. And with that, the next phase of reckoning was about to begin. The elevator slowed, the soft hum vibrating through the polished metal walls like the quiet heartbeat of fate. The crime lord stood rigid, chest rising and falling with the weight of disbelief, the cold sweat tracing the lines of his forehead. Every instinct that had once guided him through Lagos streets, the docks, the back alleys, the gilded offices, now faltered under the silent authority of the woman before him. The wife's eyes met his, unwavering, sharp as obsidian. "You have a choice," she said, her voice calm, yet every word carried the weight of inevitability. "Step down quietly. Protect what remains of your empire. Preserve your legacy." She paused, letting the words settle, the air between them thick with tension. "Or refuse, and lose everything. Not tomorrow. Not in a fight. But in seconds. Because I've already controlled the foundation, the connections, the alliances. You won't survive the fall." He swallowed hard, his pride clawing at him, demanding denial, demanding rebellion. "And if I refuse?" he asked, voice barely more than a rasp. The wife's lips curved faintly. "Then you'll find out exactly what it means to underestimate me. The streets may follow you, but they will not save you. Power without structure is just noise. And noise dies quickly." A sharp exhale escaped him. The elevator lights flickered as if echoing the shattering of his ego. Around him, the mirrored walls reflected a man stripped of certainty, forced to confront the one person he had never anticipated as an equal, or superior. The mistress lingered near the doors, her earlier confidence crumbling into a quiet understanding. Her red dress, once a symbol of allure and ambition, now felt like a warning she had ignored. She turned, stepping toward the elevator's call button, her footsteps measured, careful not to disturb the shifting balance of power. She did not speak, her exit was acknowledgement enough. She had never been part of the real game, never the player. Only a pawn. The wife's gaze followed her briefly, then returned to him. "It is your decision," she said softly, but the power behind her calm was undeniable. "Act wisely. I have always known how to win." The crime lord's shoulders sagged, a heavy, reluctant surrender. The streets he ruled, the men he commanded, the fortune he had clawed from the chaos of Lagos, all of it now balanced precariously on a single decision. The elevator doors began to close, sealing them in this suspended judgment for the final moments. Outside, the city glittered, alive and oblivious. Inside, the quiet authority of one woman had overturned a lifetime of domination. He exhaled, defeated but alive, as the door slid shut. The choice had been made. And the consequences would echo far beyond this elevator. Weeks had passed, but the city of Lagos still felt the ripple of what had unfolded in that elevator. The streets whispered rumors, the docks shifted allegiances quietly, and the nightclubs and markets no longer just feared him, they watched her. The crime lord remained a figurehead, a presence in the empire, but it was the wife who now moved the pieces. Every alliance, every financial move, every shadowed conversation was hers to orchestrate. She sat in the high-rise office overlooking the Lagos skyline, the city stretching beneath her like a living chessboard. Her fingers traced the edge of the polished desk as she reviewed reports, contracts, and subtle updates from every corner of the empire. Each number, each signature, each detail had been anticipated, measured, and controlled. She smiled faintly, a smile that carried both triumph and calm certainty. Her phone buzzed softly. A contact from one of the rival factions awaited confirmation. She tapped the screen once, and a transaction was authorized. A property dispute in Victoria Island resolved. Another shipment rerouted to secure allies. She didn't celebrate, she didn't need to. Control, she knew, was quiet, patient, invisible to those too arrogant to notice it. The crime lord entered the office, a shadow of his former self in her presence. He offered a tentative nod. Everything seems stable, he murmured, as if testing her patience, unsure whether to assert the dominance he once held. She looked up, calm, collected. It is, she said simply. And it will remain that way, as long as the rules of strategy are followed. Fear is fleeting. Influence endures. Outside, the city continued its relentless rhythm. The ferries on the lagoon, the neon glow of Victoria Island, the distant hum of traffic along Lekki roads, all oblivious to the quiet coup that had reshaped power in Lagos. She stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, hands clasped lightly behind her back. The sun was rising, spilling gold across the city. It illuminated not just the skyline, but the subtle truths of her triumph, patience over impulse, intellect over intimidation, foresight over fear. A soft smile played on her lips. She could remain, steering the empire from the shadows, or she could leave, free, wealthy, and untouchable. Either path would solidify her victory. She had won not with shouts or displays of brute power, but with strategy, timing, and patience. The crime lord lingered, realizing fully for the first time that real power was never about loud proclamations or empty threats. It was quiet. It was patient. And it was hers. The city stretched beneath her, endless and alive, while she finally allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. A new queen had risen. And Lagos would never forget.